The old alien sat in the corner of the tavern, his three eyes staring into the blue liquid in his glass. Commander Zethkar had seen more battles than most beings could count, fought alongside and against dozens of species across the galaxy. But tonight, the young recruits wanted to hear about just one war. The war that changed everything. "Tell us about the humans," whispered recruit Veltar, a young Krillian with bright orange scales. "Tell us about the Terran War." Zethkar's middle eye twitched. Even after 30 cycles, the memories still burned fresh in his mind. He took a long drink and set the glass down with a heavy thud. "You want to know about humans? Fine. But understand this first. Everything you think you know about warfare, everything your instructors taught you about honor and strategy, throw it away. Humans don't fight like the rest of us. They don't even fight like animals. They fight like something else entirely." The tavern grew quiet. Even the bartender, a massive Thurian with 4 arms, stopped cleaning glasses to listen. "I was young then, barely older than your recruits are now. The Galactic Council had just made contact with this new species from a small blue planet in the Outer Rim. Earth, they called it. The humans seemed friendly enough at first. They were curious, eager to learn, quick to make friends. Most of us thought they would be easy to integrate into the galactic community." Zethkar paused, remembering those early days. The human ambassadors had been so polite, so eager to please. They asked endless questions about other species, about their cultures, their technologies, their military capabilities. Everyone thought it was just innocent curiosity. The trouble started with the Vorthan Empire. You know how the Vorthans are. They see any new species as either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be exploited. When they learned that Earth had rich deposits of rare minerals and a population of over 7 billion, they decided humans would make excellent slaves. The young recruits shifted uncomfortably. The Vorthans were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty and their massive military might. Their warships were the size of small moons, their armies numbered in the trillions. The Vorthans sent their standard ultimatum to Earth: surrender unconditionally, accept slavery, or be destroyed. They gave the humans one standard galactic month to decide. Most species either surrender immediately or try to negotiate. The humans did neither. Zethkar smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The humans sent back a single message. Just 2 words: "Come try." That's it. No threats, no negotiations, no pleas for help. Just come try. The Vorthans thought it was a joke. The old commander stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, though he had never returned since the war ended. "I was serving as a tactical advisor to the Vorthan fleet then. Don't judge me for it. Back then, most of us believed the Vorthans were the natural rulers of the galaxy. They had never lost a war, never even lost a major battle. Their strategy was always the same and always worked. Send in the fleet, bombard the planet until the population surrenders, then land troops to secure the remaining infrastructure. The Vorthan First Fleet was massive, over 10,000 ships, including 12 of their Fortress-class dreadnoughts. Each dreadnought was 50 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to glass a continent. The fleet was commanded by War Marshal Korthak himself, the greatest military mind in Vorthan history. He had conquered 47 worlds without a single defeat. Zethkar returned to his seat and took another drink. We arrived at the Sol system, expecting the usual show of force to be enough. Most species surrender the moment they see a Vorthan fleet drop out of hyperspace. But the humans were ready for us. Not with massive fleets or super weapons, but with something much worse. They were ready with a plan. The moment we entered the system, we detected massive energy signatures from Earth's moon. The humans had turned the entire moon into a weapon. Not a Death Star or anything dramatic like that. Something much more clever. They had covered the surface with electromagnetic pulse generators powered by fusion reactors. When they fired all at once, it created an EMP blast that knocked out every electronic system in the fleet. The recruits gasped. Without electronics, Even a most advanced warship was just a floating piece of metal. But that wasn't the scary part, Zethkar continued. The scary part was what happened next. While our ships were drifting helpless, trying to restart their systems, the humans launched their attack. Not with warships or missiles, but with rocks. Rocks? Asked Veltar, confused. Asteroids, to be precise. The humans had spent the entire month since receiving the ultimatum attaching simple chemical rockets to every asteroid in their system. No electronics that could be disabled by EMP, just basic chemical propulsion and mechanical guidance systems. They had turned their entire asteroid belt into a weapon. Zethkar's voice grew quiet, remembering the horror of watching mountain-sized rocks slam into Vorthan dreadnoughts at incredible speeds. The kinetic energy was devastating. Ships that had withstood the combined firepower of entire fleets were cracked open like eggs. In less than an hour, the humans destroyed 60% of the Vorthan First Fleet using nothing but rocks and basic chemistry. But the humans weren't done. While we were still reeling from the asteroid attack, they launched their boarding parties. Not in ships. Ships would have been detected. They launched them in small pods designed to look like debris from the destroyed asteroids. Our sensors couldn't tell the difference. The old commander's hands began to shake slightly as he remembered. What came out of those pods weren't soldiers in any sense we understood. They were something else. Humans, yes, but modified. They had surgically implanted breathing apparatus that let them survive in space indefinitely. Their bones had been replaced with metal alloys. Their muscles had been enhanced with synthetic fibers. They moved like ghosts through our ships, cutting through bulkheads with plasma torches, sabotaging systems, eliminating crew members. I saw one human take on 12 Vorthan warriors in hand-to-hand combat and win. Not because he was stronger, though he was, but because he fought with a brutality and cunning that none of us had ever encountered. He used the ship's own systems against us, turning gravity generators into weapons, flooding compartments with coolant, using maintenance robots as bombs. Zethkar paused, lost in the memory. The worst part was their coordination. Every human boarding party seemed to know exactly what every other party was doing, even though we had jammed all communications. Later we learned they had developed a form of quantum entanglement communication that our jamming couldn't touch. While we were stumbling around in the dark, they were operating as a perfectly coordinated hive mind. War Marshal Korthak ordered a retreat to the edge of the system to regroup. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered Sol, only about 3,000 were still operational. The greatest military leader in Vorthan history had been handed his first defeat by a species that had never fought an interstellar war. But Korthak was not one to give up. He sent messages back to the Empire, calling for reinforcements. Within 2 weeks, the second and third fleets arrived, bringing the total force to over 20,000 ships. Surely, he thought, even the humans couldn't stand against such overwhelming numbers. The humans' response was to send another message. This time it was longer, a full paragraph. It read, "We try to be nice. We sent you a simple message telling you to reconsider. You chose to ignore it. What happens next is your fault, not ours. We take no pleasure in what we're about to do, but you have forced our hand. Consider this your final warning." Zitkar left bitterly. Korthak thought it was another bluff. He couldn't understand how a single planet could threaten an armada of 20,000 ships. So he ordered the attack. The humans had spent those 2 weeks busy. They had launched thousands of small probes throughout the system, each one equipped with sensors and communication equipment. Nothing fancy, nothing that would attract attention. Just eyes and ears scattered everywhere. When our fleet moved to attack Earth, the humans knew our exact position and heading at all times. But instead of trying to fight us directly, they did something that still gives me nightmares. They turned the system's star into a weapon. The recruits looked confused. "How do you turn a star into a weapon?" "Very carefully," Zethkar replied. The humans had discovered that their star was naturally unstable, prone to solar flares. All they had to do was give it a little push at the right time and place. They had spent months building massive magnetic field generators in the inner system, hiding them near the star where our sensors couldn't detect them over all the stellar radiation. When our fleet was in the perfect position, the humans activated the generators. They created a magnetic bottle that compressed and redirected the star's natural solar wind. What should have been a routine solar flare became a directed energy weapon more powerful than anything in the galaxy. The beams swept across the fleet like the hand of an angry god. It didn't just destroy ships, it vaporized them. Entire dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist. The beam was so powerful it continued past our fleet and created a new comet tail on one of the outer planets. Zethkar's voice dropped to almost a whisper. In 30 seconds, the humans had destroyed 70% of the combined fleet using their own star as a weapon. 20,000 ships reduced to cosmic dust by beings who had never left their own system before. But even that wasn't the end. The survivors tried to escape, to jump back to hyperspace and flee. The humans had prepared for that too. They had mined the hyperspace jump points with a new kind of weapon, quantum bombs that destabilized the fabric of space-time itself. Ships that tried to jump didn't make it to hyperspace. They were torn apart at the molecular level. The tavern was completely silent now. Even the background music had stopped. I was on one of the few ships that managed to escape, Zethkar continued. We limped back to Vorthan space with less than 1,000 survivors from an armada of 30,000. When we told the Empire what had happened, they didn't believe us at first. How could a single planet destroy the greatest fleet in galactic history? But the humans weren't done making their point. 3 days after our defeat, every Vorthan military base, every orbital platform, every ship in the Empire received the same message simultaneously. It was impossible. The Vorthans controlled thousands of star systems across hundreds of light years. There was no way for the humans to deliver a message to every location at the same time. The message was simple. The Terran Republic formally declares the dissolution of the Vorthan Empire. You have 72 hours to release all slaves, return all stolen property, and surrender your military forces to designated neutral parties. Failure to comply will result in immediate and total destruction of all Vorthan assets. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The Empire's response was predictable. They laughed. How could one planet threaten an empire that spanned a quarter of the galaxy? They had millions of ships, trillions of soldiers, weapons that could crack planets. The humans had shown they could defend their home system, but projecting power across interstellar distances was something else entirely. So they ignored the ultimatum. That was their final mistake. Zethkar finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. Exactly 72 hours later, every single Vorthan military installation in the galaxy was destroyed simultaneously. Not captured, not damaged, completely obliterated. Orbital platforms turned to debris. Starships vaporized in their docks. Ground bases melted into slag. In the span of 10 minutes, the greatest military force in the galaxy simply ceased to exist. The method was as terrifying as the result. The humans had somehow weaponized quantum mechanics itself. They had learned to create localized space-time distortions that could be triggered from vast distances without any apparent delivery system. No missiles, no ships, no advance warning. One moment a base was there. The next, it was a cloud of superheated plasma. The old commander looked up at the young recruits, seeing the fear in their eyes. That was when the rest of the galaxy truly understood what we were dealing with. The humans hadn't just defeated the Vorthans through superior firepower or better tactics. They had fundamentally changed the rules of warfare itself. They had found ways to weaponize physics, to turn the universe itself into their arsenal. But the most frightening thing wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their thinking. Every other species in the galaxy fights for territory, resources, revenge, honor, or survival. The humans fought for an idea, the idea that slavery was wrong and needed to be stopped no matter the cost. When other species fight, they calculate odds, weigh costs, and benefits, look for ways to minimize their losses. The humans calculated nothing. They simply decided what needed to be done and did it regardless of the consequences to themselves. Zethkar stood up again, preparing to leave. That's the first lesson about human warfare, recruits. They don't fight like soldiers or even like animals. They fight like natural disasters, unstoppable, inevitable, and utterly without mercy for those who oppose them. But there's more to the story. Much more. The destruction of the Vorthan Empire was just the beginning. What the humans did next. He paused at the door. Well, that's a story for another night. And with that, the old veteran walked out into the night, leaving the young recruits to contemplate the terrifying implications of what they had just heard. In the silence that followed, each of them was thinking the same thing. If the humans could do all that to the mighty Vorthan Empire, what chance would anyone else have? Outside the tavern, Zethkar looked up at the stars once more. Somewhere out there, the humans were still watching, still waiting, still ready to remind the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed. And despite everything he had seen, everything he had survived, that thought still made him shiver. The tavern was so crowded that beings were standing 3 deep around the walls. Word of HFY Stories had spread beyond the military base to the civilian population. Merchants, scientists, diplomats, even some of the normally reclusive oracle priests had come to hear the final part of the human war stories. The old commander noticed the crowd, but said nothing as he made his way to his usual seat. Tonight felt different. There was tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Many of the beings present had served in various conflicts across the galaxy, but none had faced humans in combat. They had come seeking knowledge that might help them understand their new galactic neighbors or potential enemies. The Eternal Dominion, Zethkar began without preamble, was the oldest empire in the galaxy. They had existed for over 1 million years, surviving the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Their secret was simple: they never fought. They were masters of manipulation, able to turn any conflict to their advantage without ever directly participating. The old veteran accepted his usual drink from a server who could barely contain her excitement at being so close to living history. The Dominion's strategy was elegant in its simplicity. They would identify rising powers and potential threats, then carefully orchestrate conflicts between them. They were puppet masters on a galactic scale, pulling strings from the shadows while other species destroyed each other. When the humans began establishing their protection protocols, the Dominion saw them as just another player in their eternal game. They believed that human compassion and moral constraints would make them easy to manipulate. They were catastrophically wrong. Zethkar paused, staring into his glass as if seeing the past reflected in the blue liquid. The Dominion's plan was subtle and long-term, like all their schemes. Instead of attacking human-protected worlds directly, they began spreading false information throughout the galaxy. They planted evidence that the humans were conducting horrific experiments on the species under their protection. They forged documents suggesting that the protection protocols were actually a form of mental conditioning designed to create a galaxy-wide slave state. The information was carefully crafted and brilliantly distributed. Within months, doubt about human intentions began spreading through the galactic community. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Several species withdrew their requests for human protection. Some even began actively opposing human presence in their systems. A Dritmarian intelligence officer near the front leaned forward. Psychological warfare. Turn the humans' allies against them without firing a shot. Clever. Clever, yes. But the Dominion made one critical error, Zethkar replied. They underestimated how thoroughly the humans understood their own species. Every lie the Dominion told, every piece of false evidence they planted, every manipulated truth they spread, the humans tracked it all back to its source. You have to understand, humans are natural conspiracy theorists. They've been dealing with disinformation and manipulation for thousands of years in their own society. They have an almost supernatural ability to trace lies back to their origins. Within 6 months, the humans had mapped the entire Dominion influence network. They knew every agent, every puppet government, every manipulated conflict going back centuries. But instead of exposing this information immediately, they did something far more frightening. Zethkar took a long drink before continuing. The humans began their own manipulation campaign, but theirs was based entirely on truth. They started revealing the Dominion's past schemes to the species that had been their victims. The Korthek-Alani War that had lasted 300 years? The Dominion had orchestrated it by stealing Korthek's archaeological artifacts and leaving them on Zalani worlds to suggest invasion. The Great Plague that devastated the Rim worlds? The Dominion had prevented medical aid from reaching the affected systems while publicly appearing to offer assistance. One by one, the humans exposed 1,000,000 years of Dominion manipulations. They didn't just provide evidence. They gave each affected species the complete files on how they had been used, complete with the names of their own leaders who had been Dominion agents. The galactic reaction was immediate and explosive. Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly realized they had been played against each other. Governments fell as populations learned their leaders had been foreign puppets. Ancient grudges evaporated as the truth about their origins became clear. But the humans weren't satisfied with just exposing the truth. They offered something the galaxy had never seen before: true justice. Zethkar stood and began pacing, his agitation clear. The humans proposed something called the Galactic Truth and Reconciliation Process. Every species that had been manipulated by the Dominion would be given access to the complete records of how they had been controlled. More importantly, they would be given the tools and knowledge to prevent it from happening again. This wasn't just about revealing past manipulations. The humans provided detailed psychological profiles explaining how the Dominion's control techniques worked. They taught species how to identify manipulation, how to verify information, how to maintain their independence of thought. The effect was devastating to the Dominion's power base. Suddenly, none of their traditional techniques worked anymore. Species they had controlled for millennia became immune to their influence. The puppet strings had not just been cut, they had been burned away forever. That's when the Dominion made their final, desperate gambit. They decided to eliminate the human threat directly, but they chose to do it in a way that would make the humans look like the aggressors. Zethkar stopped pacing and faced his audience directly. The Dominion orchestrated a false flag operation on a massive scale. They used their remaining agents to launch attacks against dozens of worlds simultaneously, making it appear as though the attacks came from human forces. The evidence was perfect: human-style weapons, human tactical patterns, even captured recordings of human voices giving orders to commit atrocities. The plan was to turn the entire galaxy against humanity in a righteous war of liberation. The Dominion would remain hidden while other species fought and died to eliminate their enemies for them. A young Altarian pilot spoke up from the crowd. But surely the humans could prove their innocence? Show that the attacks were faked. That's exactly what the Dominion was counting on. They knew that by the time the humans could gather proof and present their case, millions would be dead and the galaxy would be in chaos. Even if the humans eventually proved their innocence, the damage would be done. Zethkar's expression grew grim. But the humans didn't try to prove their innocence. Instead, they did something that redefined the concept of proportional response. They announced that they accepted full responsibility for the attacks. The tavern erupted in confused murmurs. They confessed to crimes they didn't commit. Not confessed, they accepted responsibility. There's a difference that only became clear later. The human announcement was brief. The Terran Republic accepts full responsibility for these attacks and the suffering they have caused. We failed in our duty to protect innocent life, and we will make amends. Justice will be served within 72 hours. Most of the galaxy interpreted this as an admission of guilt. Fleets began mobilizing to attack human space. The Dominion's agents worked overtime to fan the flames of outrage. It seemed like their plan had worked perfectly. Then, the 72-hour deadline expired, and the galaxy learned what the humans meant by justice. Zethkar returned to his seat, his hands shaking as he reached for his glass. The Eternal Dominion had hidden their homeworld for over 1,000,000 years. No one knew where it was located, what star system it occupied, or even what the dominant species looked like. They had maintained their anonymity through countless layers of misdirection and deception. The humans found them in less than 3 days. More than found them. They penetrated every layer of the Dominion's security simultaneously, not through force or advanced technology, but through something much more frightening. They had become better at manipulation than the masters of manipulation themselves. Every agent the Dominion had placed throughout the galaxy suddenly turned double agent. Every piece of false information they had planted became a trail leading back to them. Every lie they had told became a beacon pointing directly at their homeworld. But the humans hadn't turned these agents through force or bribery. They had done it through something the Dominion had never encountered before: voluntary conversion based on moral conviction. Zethkar's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You see, the humans had done more than just expose the Dominion's crimes. They had shown each of their agents exactly how they had been used, how their actions had caused suffering across the galaxy, and how they could help undo the damage they had caused. One by one, the Dominion's own operatives came forward to provide information to the humans. Not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. For the first time in their lives, they understood the true cost of their actions and chose to make amends. The psychological effect on the Dominion leadership was devastating. They had spent 1,000,000 years believing that all sentient beings could be controlled through manipulation, fear, or greed. The idea that beings would voluntarily choose to act against their own interests for moral reasons was incomprehensible to them. When human ships finally appeared in the Dominion's home system, they found a civilization already in collapse. The ruling elite had gone insane, trying to understand how their perfect system of control had failed. Most of them had committed suicide rather than face the reality that they had been wrong about the fundamental nature of consciousness. But the humans weren't there for revenge. They came with an offer, the same offer they had made to every other species they had confronted: the chance for redemption through service to others. A hegemony captain in the audience laughed bitterly. And the Dominion accepted? After 1,000,000 years of controlling the galaxy, they just gave up? Not all of them. About half chose death rather than face the moral weight of their crimes. But the survivors, yes, they accepted. The humans helped them understand the concept of genuine guilt, then showed them how that guilt could be transformed into positive action. Today, former Dominion agents serve as peacekeepers throughout the galaxy. They use their intimate knowledge of manipulation and control to help other species maintain their independence. They become some of the most effective advocates for individual freedom and ethical government in the galactic community. Zethkar finished his drink and set the glass down with finality. That was the end of the Terran Wars, though most beings don't realize it. After the Dominion fell, no major power dared to challenge human authority. Not because they feared human weapons, but because they feared human understanding. The humans had demonstrated something more terrifying than any superweapon. They had shown that they could understand their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. They could predict behavior, anticipate strategies, and counter moves that hadn't even been made yet. More importantly, they had proven that they could change the fundamental nature of conflict itself. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They transformed them into allies. They turned predators into protectors, manipulators into advocates for truth, aggressors into agents of peace. The galaxy learned a hard lesson from the Terran Wars. The most dangerous weapon isn't energy or matter or information. It's empathy. The ability to truly understand another being's perspective gives you power over them that no amount of force can match. Zethkar stood up slowly, showing his age for the first time. Today, 40 years later, the galaxy is more peaceful than it has been in recorded history. Wars still happen, but they're smaller, more local, more often resolved through negotiation and force. The humans patrol the spaceways not with warships, but with diplomats, psychologists, and philosophers. Their protection protocols have evolved into something called the Galactic Ethical Framework, a voluntary system of moral guidelines that most species have adopted not because they were forced to, but because they genuinely believe it makes their societies better. The humans rarely use force anymore. They don't need to. They've created a galaxy where the use of force is seen as a failure of understanding rather than a tool of politics. An oracle priest near the back spoke up in her melodic voice. You speak of them with respect, even admiration, but also with fear? Why? Zethkar paused at the door, considering the question. Because they never stopped being human. All their empathy, all their compassion, all their dedication to justice and peace, it all comes from the same place as their capacity for devastating warfare. They're not peaceful because they're weak or naive. They're peaceful because they choose to be, and that choice can be unmade. Every human you meet, every diplomat or teacher or peacekeeper, carries within them the potential for the kind of warfare we witnessed during the Terran Wars. They've simply chosen to use their capabilities for construction rather than destruction. But the choice remains theirs to make, and that, more than any weapon they've ever built, is what makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The humans taught us that the greatest strength isn't the power to destroy your enemies. It's the power to choose not to. But that power only means something if you actually could destroy them if you chose to. Zethkar opened the door, letting in the cool night air. Sleep well, friends. And remember, the peace we enjoy today exists because somewhere out there, a species of barely controlled primates continues to choose mercy over vengeance, understanding over force, hope over fear. Pray they never change their minds. As the old commander walked out into the night for the final time, the assembled beings sat in contemplative silence. They had come seeking knowledge about humanity's military capabilities and had instead learned something far more profound, that true power lay not in the ability to make war, but in the wisdom to choose peace. But they had also learned that wisdom was a choice, not a guarantee. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity continued to make that choice, one day at a time, one decision at a time. The galaxy slept peacefully that night, protected by beings who had proven they were capable of unimaginable destruction, and had chosen instead to become guardians of life itself. It was perhaps the most terrifying form of protection imaginable, safety guaranteed by beings so dangerous that their very restraint was an act of mercy toward the cosmos.